Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the News Brief special. In the last couple of weeks, there have been two very big interviews that Piers Morgan did, one with Tucker Carlson and one with Volodymyr Zelensky, and they kind of bounce off each other. Both of these interviews were really big, so I'm here to summarize them and respond to some of your questions so you don't have to watch 3 hours of footage. And as per usual, we're going to be discussing it together in the comments so you don't have to suffer alone and I don't have to suffer alone. And of course, leave your questions, suggestions, and constructive criticism down below because I read all of it. And of course, leave your questions, suggestions, and constructive criticism in the comments down below because I read all of it and it's very important to me. Let's go. Boy, we have all seen a lot of things circulate around the internet, both from the Tucker Carlson interview and from the Zelensky interview. And we have also seen Zelensky's responses to Tucker Carlson. Some of them are actually quite hilarious, and I really do stand by. I guess we're going to start with some of the things that Tucker Carlson said in his interview, because I guess that's a precursor to the Zelensky interview. First, we have this.
Why are you so against Zelensky?
No, I'm just trying to understand when you dismiss Putin as a dictator, which totally fair, I guess, but I'm just trying to understand what you mean by dictator. So the first criterion for dictatorship is that you're not elected. And what else? Because Zelensky's obviously not elected either.
Yeah,
So I'm just trying to kind of figure out what you're talking about.
Tucker Carlson somehow seems to think that Zelensky is not an elected leader. Well, Tucky Tuck, I have a newsflash for you. Zelensky is, in fact, an elected leader who won in a landslide with 73% of the population voting for him. And if you look at this nifty little map, a lot of that population was, in fact, in the East. A lot of trolls and bots and whatnot like to argue that, Zelensky ran on the platform of ending the war, and so he promised his people this, and then he didn't succeed. Well, no, he did, in fact, really, really tried to end the war. But negotiating with Putin, as one might know, is a bit of a tricky subject. His agreements and his promises and his words are really something of a toilet paper, because all you can do with them is, use them for a very specific purpose and that purpose only. Next, we have this.
He's banned a religious denomination.
Zelensky did not ban a religious denomination. Christianity is not banned in Ukraine. Christianity is alive, well, and prospering. Before the Bolsheviks came to Ukraine, we were using the regular calendar, the same as Catholics and the same as other Christians around the world use, where Christmas is on the 25th, and etc. After the Bolsheviks came and absolutely banned all religion in Ukraine and all practices of religion and all Ukrainian traditions, such as, Diduch on Christmas or eating kutya on Christmas or singing kolyadki and shchedrivki on Christmas, the Soviets later decided that, we need to design our own holidays and kind of keep the nation at bay, the Soviets meaning the Russians at the time, because they were obviously at the helm of the Soviet Union. And that's how Ukraine started being part of the Russian Orthodox Church. There is the Kiev Patriarchy of the Orthodox Church, and then there is the Moscow Patriarchy of the Orthodox Church. So Ukraine started celebrating Christmas on the 7th, along with the rest of the Soviet Union. On New Year's, we started putting up a Christmas tree, and there was this character called Ded Moroz or Father Frost instead of Santa or Saint Nicholas, which was a character in Ukraine. And basically, all of our traditions were stripped from us, and they were substituted for these. But that's not even the biggest problem. Yes, the Russian denomination, the Moscow Patriarchy of the Orthodox Church, is in fact banned in Ukraine. And there is a very good reason for it. And most Ukrainians, apart from those brainwashed by said church, agree with it. Because the Russian Orthodox Church is used by the Russian government to A, spy on various different countries where these branches are open. B, the Russian Orthodox priests preach the Russian world, which is the ideology of Russian Nazism, where Ukraine doesn't exist, where Ukraine does not have borders, it's just Russia, where Ukrainian culture is banned and is not allowed, where Ukrainians are just Russians who somehow made up their own language and decided to separate. The Russian Orthodox Church is used as a mechanism for propaganda and brainwashing, similar to how Scientology does it. So yeah, it's not uncanny that during the full-scale invasion where we're fighting for our own survival, we would be banning one of Russia's largest brainwashing mechanisms. And also Patriarch Kirill, who, by the way, is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, has said that Ukrainians should be exterminated many, many times, and that God would want that. So yeah, here is your answer as to why we no longer attend the Russian Orthodox Church. The next one there is this.
He has banned a language group. Those all seem like features of dictatorship to me.
The Russian language isn't banned in Ukraine. Yes, now all service fields like restaurants and stores and stuff like that have to speak Ukrainian, which is normal, provided that the only language that is the official language of Ukraine has always been Ukrainian. However, since the fall of the Soviet Union, even though that was the case, most of our TV was in Russian, most of our schools were in Russian, most of everything was happening in Russian, not because that is the language of Ukraine, but because Russia has put this idea forth that, if you want to succeed in life, speaking Ukrainian is not going to get you anywhere. You need to know Russian to make money. You need to know Russian to conduct business. Of course, if you're in Ukraine, you don't want to conduct business in English with other countries. You want to conduct business in Russian with Russia. The sphere of influence was such that Ukrainians were growing up on Russian cartoons, Ukrainians were growing up on Russian TV shows, all of the news anchors spoke Russian, all of the schools were teaching you Russian, and Russian was becoming an unofficial predominant language in Ukraine that was kind of absorbing everything else. So, in fact, Ukrainian language was discriminated against, not Russian. Today, what the law has done is it didn't ban the Russian language. It just simply made Ukrainian the priority language, which is normal, provided that we're in Ukraine. So now schools are in Ukrainian, news are in Ukrainian, TV is in Ukrainian, radio is in Ukrainian, websites are in Ukrainian. It's kind of like in the United States, the first thing that pops up when you open the website is not Spanish, it's English, but you can choose the option of Spanish. Same with Ukrainian websites. When you used to go onto any website in Ukraine, the default language would be Russian and it would show up in Russian. Now it shows up in Ukrainian, but you can still choose Russian as a language for, any website where you're buying anything. You just have to go into the menu. So the idea that it's banned is kind of ridiculous. It is not banned. A lot of Russian literature is banned because it's genocide supporting. A lot of Russian songs are banned because they're genocide supporting. That's understandable, but the language is there. No one banned it. A lot of people speak it. I can literally speak it on air right now and it would be fine. No one would do anything to me. The issue is I don't want to because I consider it a disgusting language of genocide, and that's about as much as it is. Then Tucker Carlson goes on to talk about a coup.
Well, it was not a sovereign country. It was controlled by the United States. They installed their government in a coup in 2014. But they're a puppet of the United States and Great Britain. But they're not sovereign.
Do you think they're a democracy?
Well, their leader's not elected, so by definition, they're not a democracy.
And I swear, I'm so tired of making this point, but I'm going to make it as many times as needed. It was not a coup. A coup is a violent takeover of power by a group, usually militarily, that takes the power to themselves. What happened in Ukraine is our beloved president, I'm being sarcastic as one can be here, Yanukovych, ran on the platform promising that Ukraine would be joining the European Union. On the day on which he was supposed to sign the map to the European Union, a map is just, there is no map to the European Union, but like the process of the Euro integration, the beginnings of the process of the Euro integration, without telling the nation, he went to the meeting and actually declined and decided to sign Russia's faux NATO or CSTO instead, which would bring us back to Soviet Union 2.0. The nation was devastated. We did not want that. We wanted a European future, and we elected the president that was promising that European future. And students came out to protest. Those students were then violently beaten and shot at with rubber bullets. So an enormous amount of people came out in protest. And it was a revolution because Yanukovych ended up fleeing to Russia, where he still lives today, obviously under protection of his best buddy Putin, who was the organizer of all of it to begin with. Secondly, no one took over power. There wasn't a violent takeover of power. What happened later is that All of our previous presidents came together as the acting body of presidents until an election was held and Poroshenko was elected president. So yeah, you can't call it a coup when no one took power. The people requested that it was an impeachment. It was basically the process of impeachment, except we didn't even have to impeach him, he just fled. But he was trying to become a dictator. He was trying to use the military and he was trying to use the police against the people violently to suppress protests against his actions. He created a string of laws that banned protesting, banned public gatherings. He was turning off cell service so people couldn't communicate. These are all the signs of fascism. There wasn't a coup. We overthrew him, thankfully, because he no longer represented the Ukrainian people and our interests. He lied to us and went back on everything he said and wanted to basically make us a denomination of Russia. Yeah, no coup here. Then, of course, and I mean of course, there is the rhetoric about Crimea and the referendum in Crimea.
I hope I don't get over my skis and pretend to know things that I don't. But what's very obvious is they have an interest and have for over 300 years in controlling Crimea, where their fleet is based. They had a referendum in Crimea. The people of Crimea are Russian and want to remain part of the Russian Federation. So he didn't take Crimea. It's Russian. It's filled with Russians. They had a referendum that nobody disputes. People should be allowed to choose their own government. That's the basic precept of democracy.
He did take Crimea.
Where he says that it was completely legitimate because, well, people voted for it, right? First of all, a referendum made in one region is completely unconstitutional. All of the regions of Ukraine need to vote for a region to cede. Secondly, no, people of Crimea are not Russians. A lot of people in Crimea are Crimean Tatars that have been actually exterminated by Russia since Russia came and invaded Crimea in the first place during Catherine II. The ethnic people in Crimea are Crimean Tatars, or Kremlin, which have gone through multiple genocides by Russia since Russia's inception in Crimea. And secondly, here is Putin, back in 2008, I believe, talking about how Russia has no reason to invade Crimea because there are no ethnic tensions there, and that the borders of Ukraine with Russia have been long settled since the fall of the Soviet Union. All of this rhetoric that Crimea is Russian and people of Crimea want to be Russia and all of that is made up to justify the invasion and annexation. Hitler much?
I think it's very clear, and I don't know that anyone would disagree with this, that Russia would not have invaded eastern Ukraine if the Biden administration hadn't sent Kamala Harris to the Munich Security Conference in February of 2022 to say to Zelensky on camera, we're going to make you a NATO country, meaning we're going to put American NATO arms on the Russian border. Like, you would not allow.
Then there's this. Yes, Russia would have absolutely invaded no matter what, because in 2008, a map, George Bush said that he would approve a map, which is MAP, which is kind of like NATO accession pathway work. And in 2008, the talks of NATO already started. So 2022, what changed in 2022? After 2008, no one in Ukraine was even talking about NATO, and in 2022, no one was talking about NATO either. I'm going to put this infographic here again, which I've done so many times, which shows how many Ukrainians were for or against joining NATO up until the full-scale invasion. Actually, Russia is the biggest promoter of people wanting to join NATO for their protection. And then, of course, there is the bioweapons narrative that I don't even know where to go with.
Including by your country, which I think has bioweapons, by the way. You should get on that, find out. Those are prohibited, but I think you guys have them. You're in violation.
Well, if that turns out to be true, I would be violently opposed to that.
But you know that it is true.
I don't actually.
I think you should find out.
I'll look into it.
I mean, there are biolabs in Ukraine. What are biolabs doing in Ukraine, do you think? Are you comfortable with that?
No, it wouldn't be if they're there.
But you said Zelensky was a fabulous leader. Why would he have biolabs?
I like him personally.
The dictator with bioweapons. I'm not into it. I'm sorry. I guess that it's against international law, so I'm opposed. No, look, I'm just saying international law is a theoretical concept.
Because had we had bioweapons, we would have destroyed Russia already. That's one. Two, when you talk about these biolabs, I think that Tucker and people that listen to Tucker and believe him and take his word need to understand what a biolaboratory is. So when you go and give your blood for when you go and get your blood drawn and you want to see, I don't know, if you have enough vitamins, that blood is being sent to a biolab. Those are biolabs. Yes, so when you do a test of any kind in the medical field, it gets sent to a biolab. You know, like we're sending it to the lab, so check back with us in 5 days when we get the results. That's a biolab they're sending it to. There are many of those biolabs around the world. There are no bioweaponry labs in Ukraine. In fact, those US-supported labs, yeah, a lot of pharma companies invest into pharma companies. So, of course, there are biolabs in Ukraine that had US investments. Guess what? There were also post-Soviet denuclearization programs where formerly bioweapon labs were recreated into regular biolaboratories, and the US had these programs both with Russia and with Ukraine. So those same biolabs that you are referring to that were like sponsored by the US, those existed in Russia as well, up until the full-scale invasion. And actually, Russia was one of the biggest contributors to that program. So who is a biolab central now? Anyways, I just love this type of propaganda because it's just so brainless. And it's kind of like so stupid that you don't even have to really try very hard to explain how it's wrong. But also, it pains me to see how many people believe it.
So they have said, since the fall of the Soviet Union, you cannot have NATO on our border because it's a critical national interest of ours. So unless you want to risk nuclear war, which we are now doing, you can't move NATO to their border, whether you want to or not. That's just a fact. And if you do, you're going to get a war. We've known that since the fall of the Soviet Union, and we promised not to do it. And we tried to bring, he asked to be in NATO.
Then there is this. And no, Russia did not say since the fall of the Soviet Union that NATO cannot encroach on Russia's territories. Everyone always references the not 1 inch to the east scenario. Well, Gorbachev already debunked it and said that no one ever talked about NATO expansion because that wasn't even the topic of conversation. And Gorbachev was the person in the room where this document is being referred to. It referred to East Germany because there were NATO troops in West Germany and there were Russian troops in East Germany, and they promised not to move an inch to the east until Russia comes out of Germany and Germany is deoccupied. That's what it referred to. No, Russia never said anything about NATO encroaching. And also, if they're so worried about NATO coming closer to Russia's borders, then what happened with Finland and Sweden that recently joined NATO and have borders with Russia? Well, why is the reaction not the same, and why does Putin have nothing against them doing so? Because all of these things are just a farce, and they are a joke.
He's murdered his political opponents.
And then there is this, which honestly just leaves me kind of perplexed. Who are these political opponents that Zelensky murdered? Are they in the room with us right now? Because his only political opponent since the beginning of his presidency is Poroshenko, who ran against him, and he's alive and well. I mean, I personally am not very supportive of that because I think he was a horrendous president, and I really don't like the legacy that he's left. But here is him in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, helping. Here is his factory with chocolates, alive and prospering in Vinnytsia. You know, he also built fountains there. People from Vinnytsia are very proud. He's alive, well, and kicking. He's fine. Zelensky didn't murder any political opponents. Who are his political opponents? Can you, I don't know, can you, text me? Tell me? I mean, hey, Tuck, I'm curious. I want to know as well. Genuinely. And now that we're done with the crazy rhetoric from Tucker Carlson, we're actually going to move on to Piers Morgan's interview with Zelensky that answers a lot of these questions in Zelensky's own words, I suppose. And we're going to be going through those, and I'm going to be both giving you my opinion and also some of the excerpts of what Zelensky said. So this interview starts very hot with Piers Morgan asking Zelensky about the death toll in war, because Trump has been throwing some very large figures out there.
I think the following way, approximately. Around 350,000 Russians have been killed. there are a lot of them missing in action. I do not fully know, but around 50 to 70,000 missed in action Russians. Further, they have around 600,000, 700,000 wounded, approximately. The ratio is 1 to 2 dead wounded because their field medicine is weaker than ours and they do not bring people who are wounded back. If the a person is wounded on the battlefield, it stays there. So the estimates are approximately like that, but they are very clear to reality. As regards our people, the exact numbers are very important for us. 45,100 people are dead, and we have around 390,000 cases of people being wounded. Here,
The death toll in Ukraine is 45,100 people. There are over 360,000 injuries on the battlefield, but that does not mean that those people have been injured so badly that they are not coming back to the battlefield. These figures are much larger because they account for every injury. So, for instance, if you are a soldier, you got injured, you went and were healed because the injury wasn't bad, you just have, like, let's say, a bullet wound or something, and you come back to the battlefield, then you get injured again, that's now 2 injuries. So that's not 360,000 people. That's 360 cumulative injuries. Obviously, some of them are very, very big injuries and very heavy injuries, and some of them are not. But these figures of a death toll over like 500,000 or 300,000 or whatever it is that Trump was saying, they're absurd. The death toll in Ukraine is, while it's not large, it's 45,100 people. There are also thousands of people missing in action, thousands of people in captivity. And that's horrendous, of course. But again, that's not on Ukraine, that's on Russia. There is a big section that I think Piers Morgan is asking about based on Tucker Carlson's interview saying that Zelensky is not a legitimate president and he wasn't elected, which is just, what, bro?
So would you just let Putin take Ukraine?
I would say let's have an election in Ukraine and let the Ukrainian people elect their own leader and get rid of the midget dictator who now oppresses them, Zelensky. And I would definitely not support a guy who's not elected as a democratic figure because by definition, he's not. By definition. I don't care who his enemies are. He's not worth calling a beacon of democracy if he doesn't even have why not have an election in Ukraine today? Because we've got a war. We had elections in our country during the Second World War, so did you.
But anyways, why Zelensky didn't hold an election during wartime? Well, it's unconstitutional because we are in martial law. Elections are forbidden. Zelensky is not a dictator. He's not choosing to stay in power indefinitely. He's also not really taking people's rights away. He's not doing anything dictatorial. And I always like to mention this interview with Letterman that Zelensky had, where he said to the question where he said whether he's going to run for the second term when the war is over, he said, you know what, I want to go to the beach and drink some beer. So it sounds like a soft no to me. He said he's going to be president until the war is won, but then he wants to drink some beer. The reason why we can't hold an election is because there are a lot of people who are internally displaced, who are missing their documents, and it's going to take them a long time to get those documents back on track. There are a lot of people that are abroad, and it's going to be hard on embassies because now there's so many people and the embassies are simply not prepared because we don't have as many embassies as like polling stations, right, in Ukraine. Also, there are soldiers at the front. How are they going to vote? Do they just leave their position to go vote? That's unreasonable. Mail-in voting during the war is not necessarily a thing, and that could be easily compromised. And then, of course, there are many people that are dead, many people that live in the occupation, under Russian occupation, like, you know, in Zaporizhia and in Donetsk and in Luhansk and in Kherson. There are so many people that live in occupation. Does their vote not matter? Does it not count? Because they're not going to be able to vote. And then again, Russia loves striking public places and public gatherings. So sending a bunch of people to the polling stations is just asking for Russia to send a ballistic missile there. So no, it's not possible and it's not going to happen. Tucky actually says, well, how did America hold elections during World War II? Well, Piers answers it himself, but, America wasn't invaded. And yeah, it was much easier to hold elections during World War II in America. And a significantly smaller population of America was fighting than it is percentage-wise in Ukraine today. The next question is, would Zelensky surrender territory for peace?
And that you might be prepared to consider a peace deal that would involve surrendering some territory to Russia, albeit very reluctantly. Is that now your position? Do you accept you will not get back all of the Ukrainian territory that Russia has taken?
Now we cannot return all our territories. We are adequate people. We cannot lose millions of people for the result that, and it is not yet clear that it will happen. As of today, therefore, as of today, we cannot neither violate the oath that we gave to the people who have lost their lives for the sake of us in this war. We cannot violate the Constitution, and we cannot recognize the occupied territories as Russian.
No, because territories are people, territories are memories, and also that just emboldens Putin to go further. As it stands today, no, he wouldn't, because he would only do that with the idea that Ukraine would be in NATO, the rest of Ukraine, and then these territories would join as we would free them, because then Ukraine, the territory controlled by Ukraine today would be protected by the NATO umbrella, and then, of course, it would be much easier to return the rest of the territories, because Russia would not dare to attack NATO at this stage, right? And Ukraine would have the Article 5 and the protections. But then also, we would never, ever recognize territories that Russia just took by force as Russian. They're not Russian. They're Ukrainian. They're people's lives, their childhoods, their memories, their homes, their lives that were destroyed. No. The next question is what a lot of interviewers like to ask is, would Zelensky meet with Putin to secure a peace deal? And short answer is really no, because the only peace deal and the way that it can be secured is Ukraine in NATO. Because you can have many, many deals with Putin, and I can show you all of them throughout history in terms of ceasefires that were broken, in terms of agreements that were signed that were broken, memorandums that were broken. That one time most likely Russia tried to poison the Ukrainian delegation in Istanbul. Many things Russia has done. That one time that Russia just did not like that there was a candidate running against their candidate in Ukraine, aka Viktor Yushchenko, was running against Yanukovych, and we have recently gotten the released files that Russia indeed did poison him. That's when that didn't work and he ended up recovering and becoming president, but oh well. So safe to say that agreements with Russia are not going to result in peace. Ukraine under NATO protection is going to result in peace, however. Then there is America's missing billions. A lot of people like to say that we have sent hundreds of billions of dollars, we as in America, to Ukraine in money. First of all, I and Zelensky both would like to summarize, it's not in money, it's in weapons. It's $77 billion that America has pledged in aid in weaponry for Ukraine. Only $46 billion of that already made it to Ukraine. We're waiting on another $15 billion in this year. But all of that is in weaponry aid. So it's not hundreds of billions, it's 77 billion, and we're very grateful. It's a large amount, but also a lot of that aid that's been announced is not here yet. Again, in Ukraine, there's 46 billion in weapons already. 15 is on the way, and that makes it 60 something. So 77, the rest, we don't know when that's going to come. So that's just been pledged. It hasn't been sent. And also, since it's weapons, America manufactures those weapons. So American companies benefit from those weapons, like Lockheed Martin. And American people benefit from those weapons because they get jobs. So America sends Ukraine weapons that America doesn't need and would never use and would spend money on storing or utilizing, right, securely and safely. But instead, America gets rid of those weapons and gives them to Ukraine and then produces more advanced weapons for themselves. So 99% of that money that's being announced stays in America. And that speaks for itself. There was also aid that was for the Ukrainian economy, and I'm going to let the president explain it.
Actually, see, in reality, not on paper, we got to the budget 31.5 billion support. There are important things there, energy, etc. We are very grateful. And 46 out of 77, and you receive overall 77, 46 plus 31. That is what I said, 77. I never lied about that. That is what we have actually. And as I have said, additional to those 46, some more arms can arrive. I'll list you some examples. Some people in the US said that about the support of Ukraine. I'll give you an example. Of course, there are organizations in the US that were providing assistance to other organizations in Europe. For example, they were allocating money to support Ukrainian refugees. Let me give you an example. Ukrainian refugees were provided with around 5 or 6 billion. These are Ukrainians that live in Europe and US, in where they have fled. And Europe supported refugees a lot. We are grateful that Ukrainians abroad are being supported.
Then there are questions about Zelensky's relationship with Donald Trump, and I'm also going to let him explain it. And I'm just going to say that, it's a complicated subject because given what Trump is doing in America right now, to me, it looks like Russia in the 2000s when Putin took power. He's purging. He's purging and he's putting people in power that love him, that favor him, that listen to him, that are yes men. And so it's a bit hard to be in this situation or answer these questions because you are kind of dependent on the help from America, and it's one of your biggest partners and allies, and now you're in the situation where you're fighting someone like that, and your biggest ally is having a democratic crisis. So it's tough. And that also answers, there was a question saying that if U.S. aid stopped tomorrow, then Ukraine would just fall. So it's a complex issue because no, that's not true. If U.S. aid stopped tomorrow, first of all, Ukraine still has reserves. Second of all, yes, it would be difficult for Ukraine to proceed without the U.S. aid. But then we also have partnerships with Europe. We're also producing our own weapons. But if Europe followed suit with America, then sure, yes, Ukraine would be left to its own devices, and it would be incredibly hard for us to sustain ourselves. But that would take a long, long time. And again, it would only depend on the reaction of the rest of our partners to America exiting. But I have a hunch that Europeans would not just abandon us because that actually poses a lot of danger to Europe. I think Europe would step up. So no, America is not, the center of the universe, and everything does not revolve around America. And then, of course, Piers asked Zelensky to respond to Tucker Carlson's commentary and Joe Rogan's commentary. And oh boy, are these masterpieces. And I'm going to let you watch them.
It seems to me that to this journalist, I do not remember his surname, excuse me, Tucker. Yes, Tucker is his name.
Tucker
yes,
Carlson.
It seems to me he needs to more deeply understand what's happening in Ukraine, to stop working for Putin, to stop licking his ass, honestly. It seems to me very important. It seems to me that the person, no matter where he lives, must understand things. When he simply says something, just throwing the words Has he for one time in his lifetime lost his close ones? I wish to his family, I do not know his family, I wish them peace and no losses. But
And now I'm going to play you my favorite one, and I'm going to give you a bit of a context. Yeah, I think this was the best response to Tucker Carlson that Zelensky could have ever given. And if you're wondering what does ass licking mean, it's ass kissing. It's just in Ukrainian, we don't say kiss ass, we say lick ass, which, you know, I used to think sounded fine, but now that I've lived in the US for half of my life and have spoken English for most of my life, for half of my life, as like my primary language, you know what? Ass licking sounds really freaking weird. Ass kissing sounds like what it's supposed to sound. Ass licking sounds a bit PG-13, or like, you know, like it's not meant to represent what it does. But hey, still a fantastic response. And with that, I'm going to end today's episode. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the episode, please do subscribe to this channel and turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss when the next episode comes out. Also, share this video with a friend, like it, and if you have something to say, please don't be shy. Do it in the comments. I read all of them and I really enjoy hearing from you guys. See you next time.